You either sign it or regret it. That's what my daughter said to me, not long after her wedding. But that night, before any papers, before things really shifted, there was just a lemon tart I didn't touch, a centerpiece taller than my dignity, and the sound of my own name not being called. My name's Margaret. I'm 70. I've been a widow for 7 months. And until last fall, I truly believed I'd raised a daughter who saw me, who remembered me. Lauren used to say, "Mom, when I get married, I want you right beside me." But when that day came, they sat me at table 12, way in the back, behind this massive tower of white hydrangeas. I couldn't even see the altar, just caught a glimpse of her veil when she turned slightly, but not her face. It was early September in Asheville. The whole resort glowed with warm amber lights. The floors were polished wood, creaking gently under heels and linen suits. It was that rustic Southern elegance vibe. Gold utensils, navy napkins tied like bows, twinkle lights wrapped around the cypress beams. I wore a dove gray dress, the same color David wore to our anniversary dinner 3 years ago, and the pearl necklace he gave me that night. I wore that too. It felt cold against my skin. No one on staff asked my name. They just looked at the place card and said, "This way, guest." I ended up next to a distant cousin from Ohio. We made small talk about the weather, shrimp cocktail. I smiled politely, but my eyes kept scanning the room for Lauren. When she finally walked by, her eyes flicked past me, like I was someone she passed in a grocery store. "You look fine, Mom," she said, barely stopping, already turning away. I looked down at the program in my lap. Under Parents of the Bride, it listed only David, in loving memory, and Chad's parents. They were up front, clinking glasses, waving like it was their second retirement party. My name wasn't there. They brought out dessert just before the speeches. Lemon tart, my favorite. Lauren knows that, or knew that, but it came out cold. The crust was soggy. I didn't touch it. Then the DJ tapped the mic. The lights dimmed. Lauren and Chad stood by the dance floor. "We just want to thank the people who made this day possible," Chad said. Lauren smiled, glowing in her lace dress, resting her hand on his arm. "To our mentors, our supporters, and most of all, to Chad's mom and dad." Applause broke out, and I clapped too, because that's what women like me were taught to do. Clap, smile, stay quiet, wait our turn. But that night, I didn't wait. I picked up my purse, stood up without making a fuss, gave a small nod to the cousin from Ohio, and slipped out, around the hydrangeas. No one noticed. I left the lemon tart untouched, but I carried something with me, the echo of David's voice in my head. "You'll never be invisible while I'm alive." But he wasn't here anymore. So I had to ask myself, was I going to keep fading away? 3 weeks went by before Lauren reached out. She invited me to dinner, said she missed me. If you've ever sat at a table where your presence felt more like a duty than a welcome, maybe you'll get it. I'm not angry. I'm just seeing things more clearly now. Have you ever had a moment like that? One that quietly cracked something open inside you? If you feel like sharing, I'm here. I read every message like it's a letter from someone who understands. And if you're wondering what Lauren really wanted when she finally called, let's just say she didn't miss me as much as she missed something else. I'll tell you more soon. I didn't hear from Lauren for 3 weeks after the wedding. The house had gone back to being quiet, just the hallway clock ticking and the occasional creak in the floorboards. I'd almost convinced myself she wasn't going to call. Then, out of nowhere, she texted, "Dinner? I miss you." And I wanted to believe it. That maybe, just maybe, she realized she'd forgotten me that night. That maybe there was still a small part of her heart where I lived, without conditions. But that wasn't why she reached out. Her kitchen looked like something out of a catalog. White marble, not a crumb in sight. Lauren's always been good at curating things. Even the messy stuff, like pasta night, always looked like a photo shoot. The air smelled like basil and garlic, but somehow the whole scene felt staged, like it wasn't meant to be touched. "I made Cabernet Rigatoni," she said with this tight little smile. "Chad grilled the bread." Chad was leaning against the counter, wineglass in hand. He didn't say much, he usually doesn't, but he always seems to agree with whatever's already in the room. I brought a loaf of pumpkin bread, still warm from the oven. Lauren thanked me, then slid it to the far edge of the counter, still wrapped in foil. She didn't even open it. Dinner was light: weather, work, my rose bushes. And then came the question I knew was coming. "So, how are you adjusting to everything?" She didn't say widowhood, just left the sentence trailing, like a coat nobody wanted to claim. I gave her the usual, taking it a day at a time. She nodded, wiped her mouth gently, and stood up. "I actually have something I wanted to run by you." She went over to the sideboard, pulled out a crisp navy folder, and placed it right in the middle of the table, like it was part of the decor. "It's just paperwork," she said, trying to sound casual. "Power of attorney stuff. Nothing changes. You're still technically in charge." Chad added his piece from the corner. "It's just for emergencies, really. Peace of mind, you know?" I opened the folder. Page after page of legal wording. But the part that stood out was clear as day. Lauren would have full control over my financial and medical decisions. My hands felt cold, even in that warm kitchen. I looked up at her. "I'd like to review it first." She didn't even flinch. "It's standard, Mom." "I understand, still." She cut me off. "You either sign it or regret it." The silence after that felt sharp, heavy. I closed the folder, gently, and placed it back on the table. "Thank you for dinner," I said, getting up slowly. "I'll think about it." Her smile disappeared. Chad opened the door for me. In the parking lot, I just sat behind the wheel for a while, keys in my lap, porch lights glowing in the distance. I could see Lauren moving inside, just a faint silhouette behind those sheer curtains. Then, almost without thinking, I reached for my phone. My fingers hovered, then tapped on a name I hadn't seen in years. Carol. I hit call. Carol's voice hadn't changed a bit, still sharp, calm, steady, like a needle threading the truth straight through the noise. "I'm not your lawyer anymore, Margaret," she said, "but I'm still your friend. Now tell me, what did David leave you?" I stood in the hallway after that call, just holding the phone. I didn't have a full answer, not yet, but I had a feeling where it might be. David had said it more than once, usually when things were quiet, when the tea kettle was just starting to sing. "Don't open the box unless you need to." I used to laugh at that, told him he watched too many old movies. But that night, after dinner with Lauren, after the folder, the ultimatum, I didn't feel like laughing. I felt like I was drowning in my own daughter's kitchen. The attic was exactly how I remembered it, cedar in the air, quiet like snow. I had to move a few old quilts and a rusted fan before I got to the sewing machine. David had hidden it behind the base, wrapped in a towel like it was something sacred. A steel box, heavy, cold. The old keys were still tied together with that faded blue ribbon. I carried it downstairs like it might explode. The lock gave way with barely a click. Inside, everything was organized, neat, intentional, folders, envelopes, a sealed letter with my name, and one manila envelope labeled Carol, written in David's careful handwriting. I sat down. My heart was pounding. I opened the letter. "My dear Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and someone's pushed you, probably harder than they should have. There's $7 million in a trust, in your name only. No one touches it but you. Not Lauren, not Chad, not the bank, unless you say so. I knew you'd need this, because sometimes even the people we love forget how to treat us. Don't bend." I pressed the letter to my chest. It smelled like old paper and cedar. Then I called Carol. She picked up on the first ring. I told her everything, the steel box, the trust papers, the letter, even Lauren's voice at dinner. When I finished, Carol didn't skip a beat. "It's ironclad," she said. I knew he was working on something, but he kept it close. "Listen to me, Margaret. You don't need Lauren's permission to breathe. You've got the power now. You just didn't realize it." I sat there for a long time. The papers were spread out around me like some kind of map I'd been too afraid to open. In one folder, written in bold red ink, Margaret's Trust, confidential, was everything. Account numbers, names of trustees, emergency instructions, even a note from David outlining what to do if I ever felt pressured. A month ago, I didn't even know what a revocable trust was. Now, I was holding one. The house felt warmer somehow, not because I'd turned up the heat, but because, for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't floating anymore. I was grounded, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel scared. I felt ready. Carol was already sitting down when I got there, steam rising from her coffee like a quiet little spell over the table. She had on her courtroom glasses, those slim silver ones she used to wear low on her nose during closing arguments. She hadn't practiced law in over 10 years, but some habits, like good instincts, just don't fade. "You don't need to fight her," she said, cutting into her slice of pecan pie like it had personally offended her. "You just need to outthink her." I nodded slowly, my hands wrapped around my mug. Outside, snow drifted past the window in slow spirals. January in Asheville has always had that softness, gentle enough to hold a memory, sharp enough to keep you wide awake. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope, slid it across the table. Everything David had left in that steel box was inside: trust documents, notarized forms, even a copy of the house deed he'd transferred to my name years ago. Carol opened her old leather briefcase, the same one that always smelled a little like peppermint and paper, and got right to it. "This is solid," she said, flipping through the first few pages, "but we're going to reinforce it. Add a medical directive, set up a P.O. box. You don't want important financial mail showing up where the wrong person can get to it." And in the back of my mind, I heard David's voice again. "If you feel outnumbered, you're probably doing something brave." I smiled to myself. Maybe I was. We left the cafe about an hour later, bundled up tight in our coats, our breath hanging in the air. Carol drove us to a bank she trusted, one where the manager owed her a favor or two. I sat across from a man in a navy tie while he quietly moved the assets into the newly reinforced trust. He asked polite questions. I gave polite answers. None of this felt like revenge. It felt like remembering who I was. Carol handed me a copy of the signed trust. "This is irrevocable now. It's protected. She can't touch a dime, not unless you give her the keys." I held the folder close. It felt heavier than it looked, like it carried years of silence I'd finally decided to lay down. "When she comes at you again," Carol said, "just smile and hand her this." By the time I got home, the light had turned that soft blue, the kind that makes it feel like the world cooled off a little while you were gone. I slipped the folder into a locked drawer, tucked under old family photos and a faded recipe card for Sunday meatloaf. I didn't know when Lauren would come at me again, but this time she'd be walking into a locked gate, and I was the one holding the key. Lauren's text came through simple and sharp. "Quiet family dinner, just us, Sunday at 6. No emojis, no warmth, just a summons dressed up in good manners." I knew that tone. I'd heard it in boardrooms, at PTA meetings, even at the reading of David's will. When people say quiet, what they often mean is controlled. I brought her favorite wine, Chateau Margaux, 2012, the kind she only ever mentioned when someone else was paying. She opened the door wearing heels too tall for a home-cooked meal and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The dining room looked like a showroom. Candles lit, monogrammed napkins, asparagus lined up like little green soldiers next to perfectly roasted chicken. On the mantel, a new photo, Lauren and Chad under a banner that said Future Investments Conference 2022. Fitting. We sat. Small talk stumbled along. Weather, traffic, some neighbor's new fence. Chad nodded more than he spoke. That's when I noticed the fourth place setting, an extra fork, extra plate. Then came the sound of polished shoes. A young man walked in, maybe 30, carrying a leather folder and a smile that was just a little too rehearsed. "This is Ben," Lauren said, smooth as silk, "our attorney. He's just here for a quick clarification." I glanced at Chad. He wouldn't look at me, just reached for the wine. Ben sat beside me. "Nothing formal, Miss Weller, just an updated power of attorney. Standard stuff. Lauren mentioned you had some concerns before. This one's more flexible." He slid the document across the table, crisp, ready. I didn't reach for it. Instead, I opened my purse. The zipper made that quiet little sigh, like a line being drawn. I pulled out my own folder, set it down slow and steady. "I've already established a trust," I said. "David set it up years ago. I finalized everything with Carol. It's legally sealed, irrevocable." Silence. Lauren's fork tapped her plate. Her voice came out sharper than I think she meant. "You didn't even consult me?" I met her eyes, calm. "I consulted someone who doesn't need anything from me." Ben blinked, started packing up his papers. "Well, I think that covers what I needed," he mumbled, already getting up. Lauren stood too. "You're being emotional." "No," I said softly. "I'm being clear." Chad started gathering plates, moving slowly, like he wasn't sure whose side he was on anymore. I set the unopened wine on the table, right beside the untouched paperwork. "This was your favorite," I said. "Still is, I imagine." No one said a word. I walked out with my head high. No slammed doors, no dramatic exit. I didn't look back. I let them toast to their plans without me, because some dinners aren't meant to be finished, and some invitations come wrapped in red flags. But this time, I didn't come unarmed. If you've ever sat through a dinner pretending everything was fine just to keep the peace, tell me, how did you finally say enough? Leave me a comment. I read them. It helps, knowing I'm not the only one who's been there. And if you want to hear what happened after I walked out that door, stay close. The next part still makes my hands shake when I talk about it. And hey, if this story feels a little like yours, maybe hit subscribe. We're all just trying to find our way back to ourselves. The first message came through before I even got home that night. "Mom, I don't understand what's happening between us." There was a time when hearing Lauren's voice would have made me soften instantly. Her "I love you" texts used to come in little bursts, quick and casual, usually while she was in a checkout line or sipping on iced coffee. But now, those words felt sticky, like something sweet that had gone bad. The next morning, another message. "You've changed. This isn't you." Maybe she was right. Maybe it wasn't the old me. But this woman, the one spreading marmalade on toast in her own quiet kitchen, in an apartment filled with sunlight and paperbacks, this woman felt like someone I actually wanted to be. By noon, my voicemail was full. Ping. "Mom, why are you shutting me out?" Ping. "Do you think Dad would be proud of how cold you're being?" I let the toast go cold, left my phone face down, buzzing on the table, poured myself a cup of Earl Grey, turned on that little jazz station David used to love, the one that still plays vinyl on Friday mornings. Then I picked up my notebook, the one with the soft, worn cover and the ribbon I stitched in myself. Blank pages stared back at me. I wrote, "What do I owe, and to whom?" And I didn't mean money. I meant my time, my peace, my attention. When Lauren was a teenager, she used to tell me I hovered too much. "Give me some space, Mom," she'd say with a huff, slamming her bedroom door. So I gave her space, backed away, thinking that one day, maybe, she'd come to me on her own. But I never imagined she'd come back like this, holding legal paperwork in one hand and guilt in the other. I went to the bedroom closet and pulled out David's letter again. There were soft folds where I'd opened and closed it too many times. I read the line I'd underlined in pencil: "Let love in, but not at the cost of yourself." I held the paper to my chest, just breathing. By the afternoon, I decided I needed a walk. The air had that early spring softness to it, cool, slightly sweet, like the world had just remembered how to breathe again. I passed the little cafe where David and I used to split lemon pie on Thursdays. Then I walked to the post office, closed the shared P.O. box Lauren had set up for family convenience, and opened my own, private, just mine. The key felt cold in my hand, solid, certain. Later that evening, one last message came in. "I don't even recognize you anymore." I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit delete. No reply, no explanation, no apology. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of space, full of stillness, full of me. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. By the time autumn rolled around, this quiet little rhythm had started to shape my days. I'd wake up early, before the world remembered to be noisy, make a cup of Earl Grey in that old speckled blue kettle, pull David's cardigan over my shoulders, and then I'd walk. Nowhere in particular, just the kind of walking that lets your thoughts slow down and your breath go a little deeper. One Thursday, I noticed a flyer taped by the library's return bin. "Quiet corner, Thursday mornings, community garden. No RSVP, just show up." So that morning, I packed a few lemon muffins, still warm, and walked a little farther than usual. The gate creaked as I opened it, worn wood with "Quiet corner" carved in slanted script. But what I found inside wasn't silence. It was something softer, something truer. There were women, some older, some younger, curled up on benches, sipping from mismatched mugs. Their feet were nestled between tomato vines and thyme. One woman with thick gray braids offered me a mint leaf and a warm smile. "June," she said, "you're new. Tea?" I nodded. That was all it took. Nobody asked for my last name. Nobody asked why I was there. Just, "Do you want sugar? Do you like chamomile?" There was something almost sacred about the way they held space for each other. No questions, no pressure. Helen, with wiry hair and eyes like sharp sunlight, cracked a joke about her knees being older than the library. Margot didn't speak at all, just sat knitting under a dogwood tree, her hands steady, even as the wind tugged at the yarn. I found a little spade leaning against the fence, knelt beside a patch of dry soil. The lavender needed trimming. I knew how to do that. As I worked, June knelt down beside me and whispered, "I buried my anger before I buried my husband." It wasn't a confession, just a sentence, left hanging in the air like a thread. No one tried to fix it. No one had to. That night, I opened the small notebook the women kept tucked in a tin box under the garden table. No names, no dates, just a page for each of us. I picked up the pen and wrote, "I'm learning not to vanish." And that was enough. Later that week, I pulled out David's sweater, folding it away for winter. Inside the pocket, I found an old grocery receipt: bread, apples, a small bouquet of yellow mums. 2 years ago. He used to buy flowers on ordinary days, and for the first time in months, I laughed. Not a polite laugh, a real one, sudden, sharp, the kind that takes you by surprise, like your lungs finally remembered how to ask for air. The next Thursday at the garden, Helen brought cinnamon cookies and complained her doctor was too handsome to take seriously. Margot brought a handmade blanket for whoever needs warmth. And me? I didn't bring anything, just myself. And somehow, that was finally enough. I didn't check my phone that day, didn't scroll through old messages, didn't wonder if Lauren would call, because I had started calling myself back, and for the first time, I was starting to answer. The emails didn't stop, even after the silence had grown roots. They showed up with subject lines like, "Just keeping you in the loop," or "Family update," always with a smiley face, like punctuation could sweeten a memory that wasn't sweet to begin with. Lauren's name sat there in bold in my inbox, like a headline I didn't want to read. One email had photos. Her and Chad at a vineyard, wine glasses raised, the sun catching just enough of her baby bump to feel intentional. The caption said, "Creating new traditions." I hovered over the delete key a second longer than I needed to. Then I clicked. Another one followed, an invitation to her baby shower, digital RSVP, registry attached. It read like a boutique wish list: crystal bassinet, cashmere blankets, a white noise machine shaped like a golden owl. At the bottom, a note: "We understand if you can't come, but we wanted you to feel included." Included? That word landed strange, like someone offering you a coat after they've already locked you out in the snow. I didn't reply. I just closed the laptop and made some tea. The kettle whistled softly while jazz played in the background. Pretty sure it was Bill Evans. David used to hum along to those same piano runs when he thought no one could hear. I pulled out my notebook and wrote, "Love isn't debt." I thought about sending something back. Something honest, not cruel. I even drafted it. "Lauren, you're creating a family. I hope it's one built on more kindness than control." I stared at the words. They didn't sting. They didn't soothe. So I shredded the letter. Instead, I opened a new tab, added Lauren's email to spam, and blocked the baby registry site, just to be sure. Then I picked up the library book June gave me last week, The Art of Letting Go. A little too on the nose, maybe, but the first line caught me. Some people walk out of your life like they're closing a door. Others, you learn to wave at through the window. I folded the page gently, like I was tucking away a quiet truth. Later that afternoon, I rearranged the living room, not out of boredom, but as a small way to reclaim some space. I moved the bookshelf closer to the window, lit 2 tea candles by the sill, swapped out David's cardigan, which I'd been using as a throw, for a pale blue blanket I found at the thrift store. Soft, warm, not tied to any memory. I placed the record player needle down with care. The first notes rose, rich and warm. And for once, I didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for a ping. I let the inbox stay unread. And when another message came in from Lauren, a video tour of the nursery, I deleted it. No hesitation. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of rain on the window. 8 full hours. No dreams, no noise, just stillness. And stillness, I've come to learn, is its own kind of answer. I wasn't expecting the knock. It had been almost a year of quiet. A silence I'd worked hard to build. Slow mornings, thoughtful books, conversations that didn't end in guilt. But there she was, Sunday, just after 10, holding a paper bag and a cup of decaf like she was dropping in from another lifetime. "I just want to talk," Lauren said. I paused, longer than I would have before. Then I opened the door, not wide, but wide enough. She stepped inside, looked around like she was walking through a museum of a life she didn't quite recognize. My space is simple now. Warm wooden shelves, plants that survive on gentle neglect, sunlight spilling through clean windows. I took the decaf from her hand, motioned to the little table. I poured tea into mismatched mugs. Mine was chipped with violets, hers plain and white. I didn't offer sugar. We sat. She started with the baby, how the nursery was almost finished, how some nights she wakes up terrified, worried she'll mess everything up. I listened. I nodded. I stirred my tea. Then her voice softened. I was never meant to hurt you. My eyes settled on something just behind her shoulder, a tiny ceramic owl I'd found at a flea market, now perched by the books. But you did, I said, and I learned to live beyond it. She blinked. Maybe she expected me to soften, to fill the silence with comfort. I didn't. She sighed. I'm not here to ask for money. I smiled, just a little. Good. I don't live in that transaction anymore. There it was, that flicker in her eyes. She looked down into her tea, like she was hoping to see something honest staring back. I miss when things were simple, she said, quieter now. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the little girl she used to be, the one who brushed her doll's hair and promised, I'll never leave you, Mommy. But promises like that are made with clean hands and untested hearts. That child was gone. Lauren reached across the table. Her fingers brushed mine. I didn't pull away, not right away. I let her hand rest lightly over mine. And for a moment, I felt it, the ache of what we used to have. Then, gently, I pulled back. She didn't cry. She didn't push. She just sat back and finished her tea. We made it through 20 more minutes of soft conversation. The weather, baby names, nothing and everything. When she left, she placed the bakery bag on my counter. Apple scones, she said, from that place you used to like. The door closed gently behind her. I stood there for a while, staring at the bag. Then I opened it. They were sweet, sticky, fragrant with cinnamon. I threw them out that evening. Not out of anger, not out of pride. They were just too sweet. And I don't crave things that hurt just because they come wrapped in pretty packaging. Instead, I made toast with marmalade, bitter and bright, just enough sugar to remind me life can still be kind, even without the coating. Have you ever had someone show up just when you were finally starting to heal, bringing memories you weren't sure you wanted back? If that's ever happened to you, I'd really love to hear how you handled it. Leave me a comment, no pressure, just honesty. And if you're wondering what I did next, well, some things don't knock, they crash right through. I'll tell you soon. The envelope didn't have a return address, just my name, handwritten in blue ink I didn't recognize. A forever stamp, faded American flag. I opened it, slowly, sitting out on the porch. My morning tea was still warm beside me. Inside was a photo. A baby in a pink onesie, lying on a white blanket with satin edges. Her eyes were closed, tiny fists curled near her cheeks. In the corner, written faintly in ballpoint pen, June 3. No name, no note, no love, Lauren. That was how I met my granddaughter. I stared at the picture for a long time. What I felt, it wasn't grief. It wasn't anger either. It was something heavier, quieter. I turned the photo face down on the table. A breeze moved through the rosemary by my feet. The plant was thriving this summer, full, fragrant. David used to say, "Herbs respond to silence. Too much fuss and they wilt." I thought about how quiet this porch had become since he passed. Some absences make space, others just echo. That's when Ruth showed up, shuffling up the steps, holding 2 glasses of iced tea and a small plate of lemon cookies. "You looked like you needed something cold," she said, setting the tray down. Her eyes landed on the photo, but she didn't ask. She just sat beside me. Cardigan sleeves rolled to her elbows, hands resting calmly in her lap. We sat there, sipping tea in silence. The ice clicked gently in our glasses. The sky was pale and cloudless, the kind of sky that makes no promises except this one moment. After a while, Ruth said, "She looks healthy." She does, I said, still staring at the table. I didn't even know she'd been born. Ruth gave this soft little hum and let it sit there like punctuation. No advice, no questions, just presence. The kind David used to give me when I needed it most. I thought about writing a card, something polite, soft, congratulations, wishing you all joy. I even pulled one from the drawer, the kind with watercolor flowers and cursive script. But the words didn't sit right. Too sweet, too expected. So I tore it in half, tossed it in the trash. Instead, I pulled out my old notebook, the one with the soft brown cover and the ribbon bookmark David gave me on my birthday 3 years ago. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, in slow, steady ink, "I am no one's ATM. I am no one's quiet." Then I folded the photo, slipped it into the back pocket of the notebook. I didn't throw it away, but I didn't frame it either. That evening, I went out to the flower bed beneath the kitchen window, dug a small hole, and planted a new rosemary bush, right next to the one from last spring. No applause, no audience, just earth and breath and the sound of my hands pressing the soil down firm. It smelled clean, strong. That little plant doesn't ask for anything, and still, it grows. I started writing again, not emails, not paperwork that needed a witness or a signature, just ink on paper, slow, imperfect, full of pauses. At first, I didn't know what to say. I'd pour a cup of tea, open my notebook, and just sit. But eventually, the words came, like old friends waiting outside in the rain, unsure if they were still welcome. I wrote to David first, told him about the rosemary, how both bushes had taken to the soil like they were always meant to be there. Told him about Ruth, who now brings me library books without asking what I like, just assuming I need stories with quiet strength. I told him Lauren had a baby, that I met her through a photo, unsigned. I told him I hadn't cried. Then I wrote to Lauren, 2 pages, careful, steady handwriting. I told her that love, real love, doesn't come with strings, and that I hoped she found softness in motherhood, more than she ever showed in daughterhood. I folded the letter in half, tucked it between the pages of my notebook, didn't seal it, wouldn't send it, but it wasn't sitting inside me anymore, and that felt like enough. Later that week, I started a new letter. I titled it, "To the Woman Who Forgot Herself for Love." I didn't know if I meant me or someone I used to know, maybe both. I wrote, "You tried to earn worth by giving it away, but even martyrs leave empty chairs." The sun shifted across the desk while I wrote, casting long gold light across the wood. The tea beside me had gone lukewarm. I didn't mind. Some things aren't meant to be sipped hot. Ruth knocked on the door just as I finished a line. She was holding a novel and a folded quilt. "You're writing again," she said, eyes scanning the pages scattered across the table like fallen leaves. "Just clearing the shelves in my head," I told her. She handed me the book, then picked up a little scrap of paper I'd left on the porch bench that morning. A quick poem, scribbled, forgotten. She held it like it might break. "This one," she said softly, "this one heals something in me." I didn't say thank you, just nodded. Some praise isn't for pride, it's for quiet understanding. That night, I read through old journals tucked in the drawer. Some pages I kept, others I tore out, too raw, too tangled in versions of me I didn't recognize anymore. I didn't regret writing them, but I didn't need to keep them either. The last letter I wrote that week ended with one line. "I forgive, not to forget, but to survive." When the notebook was full, I wrote on the cover in fine black ink, "Letters I'll keep." Then I placed it in the wooden box under the porch bench, right next to the rosemary. No stamps, no envelopes, no return address. I didn't mail a single one, but they were there, rooted, unseen. And somehow, That felt like being heard. It rained the morning I updated my will. Not the dramatic kind you hear in movies, just that soft, steady rain that seeps into everything, cleansing without asking permission. I wore my blue coat, the one with the loose button I never got around to fixing, and took the bus downtown. Carol met me at the office with her usual peppermint-scented hug and that small smile that says, "We've come full circle." The forms were already waiting. We didn't talk much. She handed me a pen, and I signed beside each X with a hand steadier than I expected. The inheritance. They thought it would be about money, but it never was. I gave what needed giving, a portion to the Asheville Library Foundation because books held me up when people didn't. Another to the Women's Community Garden, where the roots always felt stronger than the regrets. The rest went to a few quiet charities David and I once circled in the margins of a Sunday paper, back when we still believed small kindnesses were the strongest kind. And to Lauren, I left one line. I gave you life. What you did with it was yours to own. No more, no less. Back home, I lit the fireplace for the first time that season. The kettle hissed gently on the stove while I folded donation letters, slipped them into labeled envelopes. I packed a small gift box, seed packets, pressed bookmarks, the lemon cake recipe Ruth always meant to try but never quite did. The garden group wouldn't get a formal goodbye, just a brown box on the bench with a note that said, "Thank you for reminding me how to grow." Ruth stopped by right before dusk. She returned the poetry book I lent her and asked, softly, if she could keep one of my poems, the one about lavender blooming without asking permission. I told her yes, of course. Words are meant to be shared, not stored. The apartment was still and golden after she left. I sat at my desk one last time, opened my leather journal, wrote the final entry. I inherited the right to choose myself. I passed that on to no one. Then I gathered everything, wills, receipts, letters, quiet truths, and tied them together with soft twine. Labeled the bundle in ink, to be opened when they wonder why. I didn't expect them to understand, but that was never the point. Peace was. I poured one last cup of tea, just for me. No guest, no pretense. The steam curled upward, quiet and warm, like a prayer too sacred to say out loud. Outside the window, the rosemary swayed in the rain, still growing, still asking for nothing, still here. Some things grow quietly, like rosemary on a porch, like self-respect, once it's been watered with truth. I didn't plan for my life to turn out this way, but maybe that's what life does when we finally stop asking for permission to live it. Family doesn't always look like we thought it would, and love, real love, isn't proved by silence or signatures. It's shown by who shows up when it matters and who lets go when it doesn't. If you've ever had to choose peace over pleasing someone, you know it's not easy, but it's worth it. If any part of my story reminded you of your own, I'd be honored if you'd share it in the comments. I read them quietly, like letters from old friends. And if you're ready for another story about the day my son said I ruined his wedding right after his wife insulted my dress, well, that one left a mark. I'll tell you all about it next.